The act of peaceful protest during the national anthem is an important tool of decolonial resistance by people of color, with the goal of reclaiming and retelling the history from the perspective of the oppressed. While protesting during the national anthem has been occurring for decades across sports, it did not gain significant traction until 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick used the NFL's platform to silently protest during the national anthem of a preseason game. In 2016, 1968, the year in which Olympians Tommy Smith and John Carlos each raised their black gloved fists in playing the national anthem while they received their gold and bronze medals. Kaepernick chose to silently kneel during the national anthem to protest systematic oppression and racial injustice of African Americans in alignment with the Black Lives Matter movement. People of color organizing must be premised on making strategic alliances with each other, based where we are situated within the larger political economy. Andrea Smith. 70. The percent of African American NFL players currently. These grassroots, social media-based protests has gained a large following as a vocal opponent of racial violence by police, including the killing of unarmed African Americans Michael Brown, Philando Castillo, Eric Garner, among other African Americans of color killed at the hands of police following nonviolent crimes. 1 month, the length of time between when Kaepernick began reclaiming through silent protest and when Terrence Crutcher and Keith Scott's lives were taken by Tulsa and North Carolina police collectively, or respectively. 102. The amount of unarmed black men who were killed in 2015. Other collegiate and professional athletes have also been active in this cause both before and after Kaepernick's protests. But with differing consequences and media attention, NFL didn't mandate its players to be on the field for the playing of the national anthem until 2009. According to the NFL, per their game operations manual, players should stand for the national anthem. However, no players have been fired, fined, or suspended explicitly due to their protest of this anthem. Interestingly, though, Kaepernick became a free agent after 2016 season, and it appears as though his reclaiming strategy has completely ostracized him from the NFL. He is currently filing an appeal. The only legitimate inhabitants are those in power, the whites and those who align themselves with the whites. Gloria Anzaldúa. In the WNBA, its players have been active in the Black Lives Matter protests for over 2 years, including wearing t-shirts stating Black Lives Matters and I Can't Breathe, as well as not participating in the national anthem, which those protests were fined for not conforming to the uniform requirements. But there has been limited exposure focused on the protests in large part because of the heteropatriarchy that still exists within the sporting community in the United States. Instead, they have chosen to unite together around the shared oppression in hopes to reclaim the undue and the oppression surrounding people of color. The WNBA rarely receives significant media attention of their games, even championships, which are not even broadcast on basic network television, and the salaries that these players receive are significantly lower than their male counterparts of the NBA. $113,000 is the NBA league maximum in 2017, and $800,000 is the league minimum salary for an NBA player. This lack of acknowledgement of their talent and even the league is indicative of Andrea Smith's second pillar, where white supremacist systems intentionally ignore the accomplishments and protests of people of color in order to delegitimize them. This helps to explain why the timely and widespread racial injustice protest never receives the attention until now. However, the paradox of the white supremacy was not completely present until Donald Trump ignited a firestorm of Twitter rants criticizing the players that chose not to stand. Trump continued his slander by calling them sons of bitches for the NFL to terminate employment and persuading others to discontinue watching the NFL for as long as the league allowed protesting to continue. Perhaps the hardest thing to see is that which is in front of us. Shouldn't we ask whether such production of ignorance is yet another instance of master's tools? Maria Ortega. Over 200. Number of the NFL players who sat or kneeled during the national anthem in response to Donald Trump. This link between sports and patriotism is very strong historically, and is colonizing strategy that is used to organize people of color to believe they spreading democracy. In theory, pro sports fan bases provide a constant supply of potential recruits while being sold on making America great again. The patriotism that is promoted actually works to colonize black and brown youth. Orientalism serves as the anchor for war, because it allows the United States to justify being in a constant state of war to protect itself from its enemies. Andreas Smith. Most Trump supporters believe that any and all pro players should stand to support the military. Furthermore, the government has a backdoor bribe referred to as paid patriotism. After 2009, the federal government began to give money to the NFL, along with other pro sport organizations, to have its players present on the field during the national anthem. 6.1. In millions, between 2012 and 2015, the amount of money the Department of Defense paid its NFL teams for military tributes at games, including field-sized American flags, flyovers, and fireworks. These recruitment strategies furthered the white supremacist agenda of the NFL through oppressing the message of Colin Kaepernick's movement. Over 1,000. Number of flyovers performed by the military for non-military events in 2011. This movement was well overdue. As a result, the national anthem, which some consider an inclusive song, was also exposed for what it really is: a promotion of the death of black soldiers at the hands of American military during the War of 1812. Many Americans began to understand the anti-abolitionist and racist views of the writer Francis Scott Key. The lyrics of the third verse read, "No refugee could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave, or the land of the free and home of the brave." The attention brought to these lyrics reflects the strategy undoing of knowledge creation Gloria Anzaldúa uses to reclaim and retell her own stories. History is written by the oppressors. The stories of the oppressed are often forgotten or ignored. Given the racial tensions that are gaining significant media coverage daily, it's clear that the national anthem divides more than it unifies. Comments by Trump demonstrate a hijacking of the real story. The NFL player turned activist has sacrificed all money and endorsements to gather the courage to use the platform to advocate for those who can't bring back to light the criminal racial injustices. The most admirable part of his protest is to keep his composure while never mentioning anti-government, anti-military, or even anti-Trump statements. The conservative media's manipulation of the protest portrays the government as a guilty of seeing with arrogant eyes that skillfully organize the world and everything in it with reference to the arrogant perceivers' desires and interests. Trump has taken the issue of police brutality and turned it into a way of marginalizing people of color through the idea of anti-patriotism, by accusing them of not being American enough. By turning the attention away from the racism and toward the anti-American accusations, this led the counter-protests, particularly from the White House. Early in October, Vice President Mike Pence attended an NFL game between the Colts and the 49ers, Kaepernick's old team, which he chose to leave immediately following the national anthem because President Trump and I will not dignify any event that disrespects our soldiers, our flag, or our national anthem. This strategic act of white supremacist logic is another fine example of arrogant perception, leading to more cultural work, including entire teams that chose not to be present on the field during the national anthem, and fans inside and outside of the stadiums choosing to take a knee. With the team, even Shelley Myers had a part in the anti-kneel comments, all to reclaim the original protest of racial injustice of people of color, which Americans should have the right to peacefully protest. In my vision, I support the NFL and its current rules and do not require a player to stand during the national anthem as it allows the players to choose whether they stand, sit, kneel, or otherwise participate in a tradition of national anthem before games. I think that the reactions from most of the league's leaders, including NFL commissioner and the coaches, initially supported the players and their decisions, but since then have backpedaled on support because of public perception and its residual effects on capitalism. This support should absolutely continue and should extend to other sports as well. The anti-black lyrics of the national anthem mirror the sentiments that many people of color have attempted to decolonialize since they were first uprooted from their land of origin. I also believe that we should work toward establishing a new national anthem that is more inclusive and positive than the current version. In closing, the decolonial tactics, claiming and undoing through the power of history, spoken and written word, allows those without a voice to be empowered to tell their story of resisting their own oppressor. Following this is a short clip of a debate that was ongoing for my second item of media. I created a discussion forum with members of my family to represent a small sample of differing public opinions about this topic. The 2-minute clip includes my 2 brother-in-laws, one whom is an active member of the military, and his wife. I asked them if they thought Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem was right or wrong.